Which aspects of life do you think have been affected by globalization? Honestly, I think pretty much everything nowadays has been one way or another uh, experience a shift, a kind of change as the result of different culture and country intertwined. So I'll only name a few. For example, cuisine, right? Because I mean, food is one of the sim- simplest way for people around the world to connect to each other. You don't need to speak others' native language to appreciate and to love a meal. Secondly, I'll say that leisure activities come pretty close, like entertainment in general. Like you have theme park, people around the world are watching Hollywood movies. So you get my point. And lastly, I would say is the mindset of people. What I mean by that is it's also pretty broad, but like especially in the philosophy aspect, right? So like Taoism, Truism, stuff like that. So like in countries like in here in Vietnam, before globalization, we have only a few kind of mindset like originate from like Russia and China. Usually, usually, and our global mindset, of course. But after globalization, like with internet and trading routes, we start to adopt new philosophy like absurdism and stoicism from other country. So yeah, those are some aspects. Of course, I cannot name all of them, but those are some of the one that I think is heavily uh, affected. Affected. Are there any aspects of culture that not that have not been affected? I think for a such a sensitive time to live, so far such a sensitive centuries where pretty much everyone is kind of offended by stuff. I mean, there are clips of people out there who are barber and they are asking like people from the ethnic origin if they can touch the hair or not. So it's kind of weird, but it's also a good thing. There are a silver lining in this situation, because which means that people are a lot more respectful and careful when uh, talking about like culture in general. Like your local culture will not it's unlikely to be affect to be changed because of the globalization, as it is something that makes up a nation's identity, right? So yeah, that's it's something that I would say will not be affected. I can't really think about any other thing. So yeah. Did you agree that tradition cultures are under threat from globalization? It depends on what kind of tradition that is. Because if it's a negative tradition that cause a uh, negative development, I think that it will be replaced or completely deleted very soon. Like misogynistic, is that the word? Like stuff like that, or racism kind of will be eradicated in the near future, because they are the bad side of a culture that no country in this peaceful modern era want, right? But for pretty much any other thing, at least in my opinion, people around the world are doing their best to protect their own culture. So I wouldn't say that it's under too much threat. The threat, like like the big thing, but there also some true, especially in people, right? Because nowadays people can adopt the lifestyle, the mindset, the philosophy of other countries, and kind of abandon something related to their country's their uh, home country's own culture, but at the very core there are still sense of patriotism, there are still sense of the identity that cannot be erased, you know. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily agree that it's under a threat, like a big threat, but yeah. Do you think governments have a duty to protect minority cultures that are at risk? Uh, yes, absolutely, because uh, what I see is that minority cultures, it's at the end of the day still an aspect that should be appreciated and protected by the home country, right? So, like for example, in Vietnam, there are more than 50 different ethnic group, right? And and so, uh, and each of them are very unique, very different, and they are ethnic group, right? So they are in threat of getting extinction, and a whole kind of civilization might get eradicated in the future. So it will be a wise choice to somehow find a way to protect this culture, not only for the sake the livelihood of the people in that culture, but by protecting it, it's also open new opportunity, especially for like tourism. So I see it as a win-win situation. How do you think people from your country would describe themselves? I mean, it's a very interesting question, but also pretty hard. So let me think about it for a moment. Mm, it's it's hard to say. But I mean, in general, most will consider themselves pretty uh, let's just say friendly in general. Well, kind of, friendly, a bit like uh, they're pretty outgoing, friendly, and hardworking at the same time. Because honestly, my opinion cannot represent Vietnamese in general. So I can only give a very broad thing that I see most people have that trait. So as I say, they are hard work, they are outgoing, they are uh, they are very friendly. Just that. Which aspect of your country's culture are most important to you? I think one of the most significant aspect is our own pride and patriotism. I mean, after all, it is the sole trait that get us so far. Our history is pretty much drenched in blood and war, with all the revolution and conflict to for freedom, right? So, and it is in those hardship that our cooperation, our patriotism, say, our sense of roots and belonging truly shine. And on top of that, this also extend to people who have long gone, because what I see is that Vietnamese people are pretty conservation. What I mean by that is they remember things in the past very well. It's either like events or people in the past. I mean, an author is pretty much a things in most Vietnamese people house, because they want to remember and cherish the previous generation. And for a few times in a year we always do kind of it's not really a celebration, But we make food and put in the altar, sort of like a thank you for the previous generation for the work and for the effort, stuff like that. And then we celebrate together, take the food down and eat. So, you kind of get my point, right? So, yeah, that's it. Are there any aspect of your country culture you don't like or don't identify with? Mm, honestly, this is a very hard question. So, honestly, uh, like Vietnamese culture in general is pretty diverse by itself, right? And I really don't have like too much negative experience with that. Probably the only thing that I find a bit like a bit dislike, hate with is how materialistic certain people, especially people in the older generation, are. So let's take for example Ted Holiday when we have Lucky Money, right? The sole purpose, not really, but like the main purpose of a Lucky Money is to bring, I mean, good luck. I mean, back in the day, they just put a few money, a few dozen on. It's not that big of a amount of money to give to children because it's more like a symbolization, rather than a material purpose. So, however, like people like like Vietnamese, I think it's also the hardship in life and most poverty that kind of foster this way of thinking. But they really materialistic. Like, I mean, if somebody, I mean, there are cases where somebody only uh, give like 10,000 Vietnam dong or 20,000 to children and they outright throw it on the floor. It's so weird because I don't know why something that were made for such a pure and kind purpose turn into a race of who is richer, who can give children more money. It's really weird, and the same thing can be said for other things like back in the day, for a certain region in Vietnam, if one wants to marry a another like daughter for example, that man will have to uh, like give his maternal family, if you can call that, money and gold and stuff like that to actually make a wedding. So it's pretty constrained because people only uh, most only a large number of people only care about how many you can provide and neglect the other aspects like people well-being and emotion connection. So it's the only pretty much the only thing that I kind of disagree with my culture. Are there any other countries cultures or tradition that interest you? mm, I think that uh, there are certain like not I am not interested on the entire culture like every aspect of the culture, but I say that places like Singapore, Japan, and Canada comes to my mind, right? For Singapore, it's the cleanliness and the very innovative approach to education that I like. For Japan, it is their discipline and uh, kind of like their politeness that I adore, and Canada is because, at least to my experience, people, Canadian, a lot of them are really kind and, let's just say, stoic. They kind of embrace stuff and treat everything as uh, something that uh, you know you should look in different view to get a whole story. It's really weird that I sometimes I just can't put to word, but it's sort of like that. They really kind and sometimes a bit too kind, and very polite in general. And yeah.